In the twilight of an age when gods walked among mortals, and the air itself seemed to tremble with divine breath, the world was vast and alive with mysteries. The forests whispered with hidden spirits, rivers carried the laughter of nymphs, and the sky itself was a tapestry where power and passion entwined. In this realm, the immortal and the mortal shared space, but never equally, for desire was the bridge between them, sometimes gentle, sometimes consuming, always dangerous. It was in such a world, between golden radiance and shadowed groves, that the tale of Apollo and Daphne unfolded, destined to remind hearts across centuries that love and longing can be both blessing and curse. The forests of Greece held a beauty that words could only partially capture. Sunlight filtered through canopies of oak and laurel, creating a trembling veil of gold over the mossy ground. Birds moved through branches as if singing hymns to unseen divinities, while streams ran clear and cool, reflecting the heavens with glass-like purity. Within these sacred groves, mortals came to seek omens, and gods lingered in disguise, their eternal desires clothed in mortal forms. The air smelt of resin, honey, and the salt carried from distant seas. It was a world not yet divided by disbelief, one where myth was not a story, but the very breath of existence. Among all gods who tread this realm, none shone brighter than Apollo, son of Zeus and Leto. He was the embodiment of light. Every ray of the sun seemed to carry his laughter. Every chord of the lyre vibrated with his heartbeat. His beauty was the kind that poets could only attempt to sketch. Golden hair that caught the daylight as though woven from the very threads of the sun, eyes burning with the sharpness of prophecy, skin bronzed with eternal youth. He walked not as one among many, but as one who illuminated all else. Yet his radiance carried weight, for light can warm, but it can also burn. Opposite him, though not yet bound to his gaze, was Daphne, daughter of rivers and forests. She was not divine in the same measure as Apollo, yet in her there pulsed the wild eternity of nature itself. To mortals she was a vision, long hair cascading like streams of night, limbs swift as deer leaping through thickets, laughter that seemed drawn from water's rush and leaves' trembling sighs. To the gods, she was something rarer still, untamed. While many maidens sought the favor of Olympians or dreamt of love beneath the glow of ambrosial gazes, Daphne resisted the bonds of desire. She carried within her a freedom as ancient as the rivers, a devotion to Artemis and to chastity, not born of disdain for pleasure, but from reverence for independence. She belonged to herself and to the wild places where no hand could claim her. The stage was thus set. The radiant god of the sun, the relentless bringer of light, and the nymph who embodied the quiet shadows of the forest, where freedom swayed with the wind. Desire in such a world was never neutral. It was an arrow poised in a bow, its flight promising rapture for some and ruin for others. To the gods, love was both gift and weapon, often tangled with pride, rivalry, and vengeance. For every union blessed, another was cursed. For every embrace welcomed, another was pursued with grief. In Apollo and Daphne's tale, this paradox becomes flesh, a living reminder that longing does not always meet consent, and pursuit does not always end in touch. The Greeks knew well that passion could wound as deeply as it could heal. They told stories of gods who fell in love with mortals only to destroy them, of mortals who sought divine affection only to be consumed. Desire was a flame, dazzling, irresistible, and dangerous. It could make vines blossom overnight, but it could also scorch fields barren. Apollo himself knew this truth, for his songs had healed wounds and hearts alike, but his pride often blinded him to the shadows that lurked within his own brightness. Daphne too lived in awareness of the gods' appetites. She knew that beauty could draw attention not only from mortals who adored her, but from powers against which no plea could stand. Her freedom was precious because it was fragile, always one gaze away from being threatened. And so the myth begins not with harmony, but with imbalance. The god of light, destined to shine on all, and the maiden of shadows, destined to belong only to herself. Their story is not merely a tale of pursuit, but a meditation on the boundaries between devotion and possession, between love freely given and love violently demanded. Within it lies the eternal question: is desire a divine gift that brings life closer to the gods, or is it a curse that consumes what it touches? The forests where Daphne roamed seemed to hum with anticipation of this answer. She often wandered with her companions, other nymphs who cherished laughter and freedom under the moonlight. She would race through clearings, her feet brushing soft grass, her arms raised as if in prayer to the wind itself. When rivers called, she would wade through their currents, water clinging to her skin like silver. Every gesture of hers belonged to movement, to running, to evading the stillness that came when eyes lingered too long. She was not meant to be gazed upon, not meant to be held. She was a spirit in flight, a prayer to unbroken liberty. Apollo, though radiant, was not free from shadows. His victories over serpents and monsters, his songs of wisdom, his prophecies whispered through the oracles, all these gave him stature and reverence. Yet pride often swelled within him. He was admired, he was adored, but he was not always loved. His presence commanded reverence, but reverence is not intimacy. And deep within his immortal heart, he longed for intimacy, for passion that could reflect his brilliance back at him. This longing, untempered by humility, could twist into obsession. In this way, even the god of light carried the seeds of darkness, for no flame is without shadow. Desire, then, became the central thread. It did not arise as a gentle flame between two equal souls, but as a spark kindled by divine interference, for the arrows of Eros were never idle. Love in this myth is not tender choice, but a force hurled, a compulsion burning hotter than reason. Apollo, struck by the sting of an arrow tipped with passion, would soon find himself consumed. Daphne, pierced by another, tipped not with love, but with aversion, would find herself fleeing, her very veins filled with dread of what Apollo embodied. Their fates diverged before their paths even crossed, for the gods had written in them a lesson about pursuit, resistance, and the cruel symmetry of attraction denied. Yet before the chase begins, the world itself seems to prepare. The air grows thicker with golden light, as though Apollo's presence cannot be contained. The rivers murmur more urgently, as though warning Daphne of what approaches. Birds fall silent, waiting for the inevitable collision between desire and refusal. The earth is not passive in these myths. It feels, it listens, it prepares to intervene. For when a god desires, the world itself must bend or resist. The myth of Daphne and Apollo is not of union, but of transformation. Even in its opening whispers, there is foreshadowing of roots and bark, of a body becoming tree, of love denied yet immortalized. It is a story that asks whether freedom can be preserved in the face of relentless desire, and whether devotion can survive without possession. The Greeks, in telling this tale, did not give easy answers. They left only the lingering ache, the beauty of a god's sorrow, and a maiden's escape, etched forever into the laurel leaves that would crown poets and victors alike. Thus, the introduction unfolds like a dawn, both beautiful and foreboding. In the glow of Apollo and the shadows of Daphne, the stage is set for a pursuit that will stir the heart with longing and unease. The gods may walk in light, but mortals and nymphs know the weight of choice, the fragility of freedom. And as this myth begins, desire hovers in the air, like the moment before a storm, charged, irresistible, and destined to break. Apollo, the son of Zeus and Leto, bore within him a brilliance that seemed almost too much for the mortal world to endure. He was the god of light, and wherever he walked, shadows retreated, reluctant to linger in his presence. His hair glistened as though each strand was spun from golden threads plucked from the very sun itself, flowing down his shoulders with effortless majesty. His eyes, sharp and radiant, glowed with prophecy, as though they could pierce the veils of both future and heart. Every movement he made carried grace, the kind that could silence a crowd or inspire the poets who sought to immortalize him in verse. His lyre rested often in his hands, and with it he coaxed melodies so pure that rivers slowed to listen, and hearts swelled with longing. Yet beneath this radiance lay pride. Apollo knew he was desired, admired, envied. The songs sung of him were endless, the temples dedicated to him countless. The oracles spoke with his voice, and kings sought his favor as though no fate could unfold without his consent. This worship, while sweet, hardened him. It gave him confidence so bright it nearly blinded him, and in that brilliance burned impatience. He did not know the taste of refusal nor the coldness of distance. He longed for affection that matched the eternal warmth of his own flame. But when affection was withheld, his desire twisted into something relentless. He believed his beauty, his music, his divine light were gifts that no soul could resist. Desire for him was a right as much as a hunger. His beauty was not merely physical, but divine. When he walked across fields, the grass seemed to bow, leaning toward him as though yearning for the sun. When he played his lyre, mortals and immortals alike forgot themselves in rapture. His laughter had the brightness of morning, and his anger struck with the force of a noonday blaze. He was creation and destruction bound in a single being, dazzling and dangerous all at once. Yet what Apollo lacked was humility, the understanding that not all light is welcome, and not all hearts wish to be warmed by flame. In contrast stood Daphne, daughter of the river god Peneus. If Apollo was sun, Daphne was river. If he blazed, she flowed. She embodied not the overwhelming majesty of the sky, but the quiet, eternal freedom of the earth's embrace. Her beauty was not one of glittering spectacle, but of natural grace, limbs lithe and swift, skin kissed by the sun through leaves, hair as dark as midnight water rippling in the current. She was the kind of beauty that did not demand attention, but compelled it nevertheless. The kind of beauty that seemed unrepeatable, born only once, fleeting like a spring morning. When she ran, her steps barely touched the earth, as though the ground itself rejoiced at her flight. When she rested, leaning against the bark of an ancient tree, her stillness was as deep as the forest's heart. Her laughter rang not like the polished music of Apollo's lyre, but like the spontaneous melody of wind whistling through branches. She was wild harmony, a symphony composed not of notes, but of breath, shadow, and motion. She carried the scent of pine and river mist upon her skin, and her presence made flowers seem to bloom more brightly, waters to shimmer more vividly. Daphne's devotion was to Artemis, goddess of the hunt, the moonlit virgin who prized freedom above all bonds. In Artemis, Daphne found not only a patroness, but an ideal. A woman untouched, unclaimed, moving through the world without being possessed by it. To Daphne, chastity was not a rejection of the body's beauty or the sweetness of love. It was a declaration of sovereignty. She belonged to herself. She belonged to the rivers, to the trees, to the living wilderness that breathed with her. To bind herself to another, even to a god, would be to surrender her essence. She did not despise desire, but she feared captivity, the way vines could strangle a tree if left to grow unchecked. Their natures, destined to collide, were marked by contrast. Apollo was fire, Daphne was water. He was the blazing sun, eternal and dominant, while she was the rooted tree, swaying but never bending, alive with quiet power. Where his presence was commanding, hers was evasive, like a deer that could vanish into shadows in the blink of an eye. He reached outward, seeking to draw the world into his embrace, while she turned inward, content to belong to herself and the earth. He craved recognition, and she craved freedom. And between them stretched a chasm no bridge could span, except that of desire, a chasm destined to collapse into tragedy. When Apollo's eyes first fell upon Daphne, it was not mere admiration. His gaze clung to her as though the sun itself wished to drink the essence of the forest maiden. She seemed untouched by his radiance, immune to the blaze that usually set hearts afire. Her refusal to yield, her unshaken purity awakened in him a passion he could not temper. He desired not only her beauty, but her wildness, her very resistance. The god of light, who had always been adored, now confronted a soul who did not bend toward him. It was as though her defiance itself was a song that called to him more powerfully than any hymn his worshippers had sung.
Daphne, however, felt his gaze as a weight. To her, Apollo's attention was not warmth, but heat too near. A blaze that threatened to consume the forest she called home. His brilliance, which dazzled others, blinded her. Where others heard his music as rapture, she heard it as chains forging themselves around her spirit. She saw in him not love, but pursuit, not tenderness, but demand. The more he looked upon her, the more she longed to vanish, to dissolve into the flowing streams that bore her lineage. His passion was a storm, and she wanted only the calm of the riverbanks and the whisper of leaves. The sensuality of their tension pulsed like unspoken words between them. Apollo's longing was palpable, a hunger that shimmered in every glance, in every imagined touch. He dreamed of fingers tangled in her hair, of lips brushing against her laughter. But Daphne's sensuality was of another kind, an unapproachable beauty, one that belonged to the wind in the trees, the water curling over stones, the cool shade where no sun could dominate. She was the sensuality of freedom, untouchable, irresistible, because she could never be possessed. And so their characters were set against each other, the god of unrelenting light and the maiden of untamed shadow, one drawn by irresistible hunger, the other fleeing with every fiber of her being. Their very essence created the tension that would ignite the myth. Theirs was not a story of harmonious balance, but of fire and water meeting, clashing, and transforming one another in ways neither desired, yet neither could avoid. This contrast of fire yearning to consume and water yearning to escape would ignite the tale into motion. Theirs was not a story of union, but of pursuit sharpened by longing. Their bodies, their spirits, their desires were destined to collide, not in embrace, but in resistance. The sensuality of their myth rests not in fulfillment, but in the unbearable space between yearning and refusal, between reaching and retreating, between passion and freedom.
It began not with Apollo's own choice, but with the quiet cruelty of another god. Eros, the mischievous child of love, had taken offense at Apollo's pride. The radiant son of Zeus had once mocked him, belittling his small bow and delicate arrows. What use, Apollo had said with the arrogance of a victor, are your childish darts compared to mine, which slay monsters and bend nations to my will." Eros, stung by such scorn, vowed to show the god of light that even the smallest arrow could pierce the greatest heart. And so, hidden within the folds of the sky, Eros strung his bow and drew 2 arrows, one tipped with gold to ignite irresistible passion, and one tipped with lead to awaken repulsion, loathing, and fear. The first he loosed at Apollo, striking his heart so deeply that even the heat of the sun paled before the fire it set aflame. The second he loosed at Daphne, grazing her soul and filling her with terror at the very thought of love, of touch, of possession. In that instant their fates diverged, one consumed with yearning, the other consumed with dread. For Apollo, the world narrowed to the figure of Daphne. He saw her not merely as a maiden of the forest, but as the embodiment of everything his heart craved and his pride demanded. Her dark hair shimmered like midnight rivers, her lips curved with unintentional allure, her movements swift and fluid as though the earth itself adored her steps. Every breath he drew seemed incomplete without her presence, every glance incomplete without her form. Desire, sharpened by divine compulsion, stripped him of reason. The god of light, who spoke with wisdom through oracles, who healed with song and prophecy, now burned with a madness that none of his powers could soothe. Daphne, however, felt the opposite. Apollo's gaze pressed upon her like a weight, suffocating, suffusing the air with heat she could not endure. His beauty, which drew worship from nations, struck her not with longing, but with revulsion. Every time his shadow fell near, her heart raced, not with attraction, but with the need to flee. His presence, so commanding to others, felt to her like a prison wall closing in. The leaden wound of Eros's arrow poisoned her against all desire, turning what might have been mere indifference into dread. She longed to remain free, to belong only to the forest, but now she sensed in Apollo not admiration, but pursuit, and pursuit meant captivity.
Thus, tension grew, thick as the summer air before a storm. Apollo's yearning intensified with each passing moment. He followed her steps, calling out words meant to soothe, but sharpened instead by desperation. "Fair nymph, do not flee me. I am no threat to you. I am Apollo, the bringer of light, the protector, the healer. With me you shall know safety, worship, immortality. Your beauty is too great to hide in these forests." His voice was honey, but to Daphne it dripped with chains. Every promise he uttered sounded like a bond tying her against her will. Daphne's desperation grew as his passion burned hotter. She fled through the groves, her limbs swift and tireless, yet always she felt his nearness, the golden glow of his divinity cutting through shadow like a predator's gaze. Her breath quickened, her heart thundered in her chest, but she would not yield. Each step was a prayer to the gods, to Artemis, to her river-born father, begging them to preserve her freedom. Fear, sharp and consuming, became her companion, as if the very arrow lodged within her pulsed with dread each time Apollo's footsteps echoed too close. The chase began.
not just of bodies, but of spirits. It was a pursuit, both literal and metaphorical. Desire pursuing freedom, love clashing with resistance, flame chasing water. Apollo's strides devoured the earth, his immortal body tireless, driven by a hunger beyond mortal comprehension. Daphne darted between trees, leapt streams, vanished into shadows, her body fueled not by strength alone, but by terror and determination. The forest seemed to aid her, branches stretching low to block Apollo's path, roots rising to slow his pursuit. Yet still he pressed onward, radiant, unstoppable. The metaphor lived in their very movement. Apollo did not merely chase Daphne. He chased the untamed spirit she represented, the refusal of nature to bend before power, the defiance of freedom against possession. Daphne did not merely flee Apollo. She fled every gaze that sought to bind her, every hand that sought to claim what was not freely given. The chase became a hymn to two opposing truths, that desire longs to embrace and freedom longs to escape. Neither could surrender without ceasing to be what they were. Apollo's words carried on the wind were both plea and command. "Stay, Daphne. See what I offer you. My temples, my songs, my eternal devotion. I would place your name upon the lips of every poet, crown you above all nymphs. Do not waste your beauty in solitude. With me, your radiance will be worshipped as the sun itself." Yet the more he promised, the further she ran. His vows, gilded with eternity, were to her a net woven of light, seeking to entangle her in promises she had no wish to keep. Daphne's reply was silence, her refusal voiced only in the rhythm of her fleeing feet and the desperate pounding of her heart. She prayed not with words, but with movement, her body a living supplication for freedom. To her, Apollo was not a lover, not even a suitor. He was the embodiment of captivity, of the sun that scorched too hot, that left no shadow in which to hide. She did not see the gentleness he claimed to offer. She felt only the blaze of his hunger searing away her peace. The tension between them grew unbearable, like the tightening of a bowstring that must soon snap. Apollo, god of light, driven by the arrow of passion, could no longer temper his pursuit. Daphne, bound by the arrow of dread, could no longer find solace in mere flight. Their chase was no longer a matter of distance, but of inevitability. For every step she took, Apollo took too. For every barrier the forest raised, Apollo's fire broke through. Desire, inflamed by divine will, was consuming him. Fear, sharpened by divine spite, was consuming her. And still they ran, through groves, across meadows, beneath the endless sky. The world itself seemed to hold its breath, knowing that when sun and river collided, when fire and root met in desperate struggle, something irreversible would take place. Desire pursued, freedom resisted, and the forest echoed with the sound of love twisted into chase, of yearning turned to fear. The chase grew longer, more desperate, until even the forest seemed to tremble beneath their passage. Apollo's immortal strides devoured the ground, his body gleaming like molten fire, tireless, relentless. Daphne, though swift as a deer startled by a hunter's bow, felt her breath grow ragged, her limbs heavy. The wind tore at her hair, streaming it behind her like a dark banner of resistance, while her skin glistened with sweat, each drop catching the sun like silver dew. Still she pressed on, refusing to surrender, though fear seared her veins as fiercely as Apollo's desire burned his. Behind her, the god's voice rang out, torn between plea and command. "Daphne, do not flee me. I am not your enemy. I am your salvation, your eternal companion. Do you not see? I would honor you, worship you. With me you will never know decay, never know sorrow. Do not throw away what the gods themselves have offered you through my love." His words were laced with longing so intense that even the trees seemed to shiver. Yet to Daphne, they fell upon her ears like chains rattling, a cage tightening around her freedom. She darted through thickets, her bare legs cutting against brambles, the sting of scratches marking her flesh. Her breath came in sobs, yet her beauty only seemed to grow more vivid in flight. Her flushed cheeks, her hair wild with movement, the arch of her body as she leapt fallen branches. She was the very image of untamed sensuality, though none of it was offered. Her beauty was not for possession, but for the wild itself, for the rivers and winds that had raised her. Still, Apollo saw her as a flame sees dry wood, irresistible, combustible, necessary to consume. Closer he came, so near that she could feel the heat of his breath on her neck, the faint brush of his fingertips against her hair as he reached out. The air between them trembled, thick with yearning and resistance, with a hunger that sought to close the gap and a terror that widened it. Apollo's body leaned forward, arms extended, his golden form blazing like a storm breaking through the canopy. He could almost taste her, almost claim her, the distance between them reduced to the trembling breath of a heartbeat. "Stay, Daphne," he cried, his voice breaking with desperation. "Do not deny me. Your beauty is too much for these woods, too radiant to be hidden away. You were made for love, for my love. You will be immortal in my embrace, your name sung by all, your form adored for eternity." His words were fire, searing the air, wrapping around her like flames that sought to consume her.
But Daphne's body strained against him with all the strength of a soul that refused to be caged. She felt the ground itself beneath her feet, cool earth that knew her spirit, the river's song echoing faintly in her blood. Every step screamed with resistance, every muscle burned with the agony of refusal. She could feel Apollo's presence pressing in, his heat, his voice, the sound of his pounding heart behind her like a drum of conquest. The world blurred into sound and breath, into the clash of desire and terror. At last, she felt his hand graze her arm, fingers brushing her skin with unbearable intensity. A shiver ran through her body, not of longing, but of dread sharpened by despair. She knew she could not run forever. His immortal strength would outlast her mortal breath, and his hunger would not relent. The moment of capture hung poised in the air like a blade above her neck. Apollo's fingers lingered at her skin, aching to close around her wrist. He imagined her trembling body in his arms, her chest heaving against his, the salt of her sweat mingling with his breath. The heat of his desire scorched every thought until all that existed was this, her nearness, her resistance, and his need to dissolve it. His voice faltered as he whispered, half plea, half command, "Do not run from me, Daphne. I burn for you. I wither without you. You are my song, my prophecy, my light." Her heart clenched. To yield meant the loss of all she cherished, her freedom, her purity, the sacred solitude of the forest. Yet to resist meant exhaustion, the inevitable collapse into his embrace. Trapped between despair and surrender, she felt terror peak into clarity, and clarity erupted from her lips in a cry so raw, so desperate that the very forest paused to listen. "Father, Earth, gods who see me, hear me, save me. Grant me freedom from his embrace. Let my form be changed, let it be stripped from me, so long as I may remain untouched, unclaimed. Do not let his arms bind me. Do not let his lips consume me. Take me from this chase. If I cannot escape with flight, then grant me escape with transformation."
Her voice cracked like lightning, shaking leaves from branches. Her cry was a plea not to Apollo, not to the god who pursued her with devotion and desperation, but to the earth itself, to her river-born father, to the divine wilderness that had always been her only love. Her voice shook with the power of truth, trembling with the passion of a spirit that would rather lose its very body than surrender its freedom. And in that moment, the world answered. The earth beneath her feet softened, shifting into cool mud that clung to her toes. A chill rose through her body, creeping up her legs like the touch of roots burrowing into soil. Her calves stiffened, her knees locked as wood thickened across her skin. She gasped, arms stretching forward, but instead of reaching freedom, they grew heavy, stiff, splitting into branches. Her hair, once flowing dark as water, shimmered green and burst into leaves. Her heartbeat slowed, deepened, transformed into the silent pulse of sap rising through new veins of wood. Apollo's hand, reaching for her, closed not upon warm flesh, but upon rough bark. His fingers pressed into a trunk where a maiden had once stood, the living heat replaced by cool silence. He stared, stunned as her body surrendered not to his passion, but to the earth's eternal embrace. Even then he clung to her. His hands slid along the bark as if caressing skin, his lips pressed against leaves as if they were still strands of her hair. He wept against the tree, whispering words of devotion, his fire undimmed though the object of his desire had vanished. What he had almost grasped now stood before him transformed, beautiful still, but forever beyond his reach.
The sensual chase, filled with heat and breath, with sweat and straining limbs, ended not in touch, but in transformation. The climax was not the union Apollo sought, but the ultimate resistance, desire denied by metamorphosis, love twisted into eternal absence.
The forest fell into a silence so profound that even the whispers of the wind seemed to pause, as though the earth itself held its breath in reverence to what had just unfolded. Daphne, once fleet and untouchable, now stood immobile, her body wholly transformed. Flesh yielded to bark, limbs became steadfast roots that anchored her into the soil, and hair unfurled into a cascade of deep green leaves that shimmered in the dappled sunlight. Her eyes, once wide with terror and flight, were now replaced by the still serenity of wood and foliage. Yet a glimmer of her indomitable spirit lingered in the gentle sway of her branches and the soft rustle of her leaves. Her breath, once quick and ragged, became the faint sigh of the forest itself. Apollo stumbled forward, his golden form glowing even as grief settled over him like a shadow. He reached out, desperate, as if sheer will could restore the maiden to flesh. His hands pressed against the rough surface of the laurel tree, searching for the warmth, the softness that had just vanished from his grasp. The bark was unyielding, cool and smooth, and for the first time he realized the futility of his pursuit. The god who had conquered plagues, guided mortals, and charmed the hearts of men and women, now stood powerless before the permanence of the earth's answer. Every fiber of his being recoiled in disbelief, yet every fiber also burned with a love transformed by impossibility. The fire of desire that had driven him now shifted into mourning, a sorrow that was at once beautiful and unbearable. Apollo pressed his forehead against the trunk, closing his eyes to the sun, as if he could feel Daphne's spirit through the tree's living form. Daphne, my light, my song, my impossible longing, you are lost to me, yet in you I see eternal beauty. His voice trembled with the weight of grief, carried into the branches like wind through trembling leaves. Every word was devotion incarnate, every whisper a caress denied, every exhalation a prayer to the gods for her continued safety, even at the cost of his desire. The laurel, rooted and unmoving, exuded the quiet dignity of triumph and resistance. Daphne's form had become not merely a tree, but a living testament to freedom preserved at the price of corporeal existence. Every leaf that shimmered in the sunlight carried her defiance. Every branch stretching toward the sky spoke of a spirit unbroken. The forest seemed to honor her, as if all living things, birds, rivers, streams, and winds, paused to witness this extraordinary moment. Birds perched silently in the canopy, their wings still, and even the rivers slowed to reflect the golden sun and the sentinel standing within its embrace. Daphne's transformation was complete, yet her essence remained alive, entwined with the world, unyielding and eternal.
Apollo, in his grief, vowed that her essence would never fade from the memory of mortals or gods. From that day forward, he decreed the laurel sacred, a symbol of victory, virtue, and devotion. Crowns of laurel would grace the brows of poets, heroes, and victors, carrying forward the memory of Daphne's beauty and her refusal to be possessed. No mortal or divine being would ever forget her. She had transcended mortality, yet her story was now preserved in every leaf and branch, in every whisper of the wind through the forest. The sensual tension that had surged through the forest, the rapid heartbeat, the heat of desire, the straining muscles of flight and pursuit, now dissolved into a quiet, aching stillness. Apollo could no longer touch her, no longer feel the warmth of her skin, no longer taste the essence that had consumed his every thought. Yet, paradoxically, the intensity of his passion had not vanished. It had crystallized into worship. Every glance he cast upon the laurel, every song he played upon his lyre, every offering in her honor was infused with longing, with the desire to venerate what could never be possessed. The tragedy of unfulfilled desire had become beauty itself, the echo of longing eternal in its intensity and purity. Apollo lingered beside the laurel for hours, the sun sliding across the sky, shadows lengthening. His hands traced the grooves in the bark, memorizing the form that had once been Daphne's body. His lips pressed against the rough surface, as though it could substitute for her warm skin. His lyre rested across his knees, yet he did not play. Music, for now, was too close to song and too far from touch. His grief was a sacred flame, illuminating longing without consummation, and in that flame he discovered a strange solace. Though he could not hold Daphne in his arms, he could honor her through memory and devotion. The forest itself seemed to bear witness to this duality of loss and reverence. Sunlight filtered through the branches, casting dappled patterns upon the forest floor, as if the leaves themselves performed a silent hymn to Daphne's spirit. The air carried the faint scent of sap and pine, mingling with the memory of her fleeting presence in flight. Even the streams seemed to flow more gently, their surfaces catching reflections of light that shimmered like golden tears. All of nature, in subtle ways, had been touched by the tension, by the chase, and now by the transformation that had resolved it. Daphne's resistance had not ended in defeat. It had been immortalized, woven into the living fabric of the world itself.
In this moment, the sensual tension shifted from corporeal heat to spiritual intensity. Apollo's desire was no longer for physical contact, but for recognition and memory. He bent low, whispering to the laurel, to the forest, to the winds, telling them of her courage, her beauty, and her refusal. You are eternal, Daphne. You run still in every leaf, every breath of wind, every song that trembles across the earth. Though I cannot claim you, I will carry you always in my light, in my music, in the devotion that no power can take from me. His words were a benediction, and in them the fire of passion found release, not in fulfillment, but in veneration. And thus the outcome was complete. Daphne, once mortal and elusive, had become immortal and immovable, a laurel that would bear her essence through time, Apollo, once consumed by desire, became the guardian of her symbol, channeling longing into reverent worship. The chase, the fevered pursuit, the heat of near touch, all transformed into silence, into stillness, into a memory etched into the natural world. Touch was denied, yet presence remained. Passion was not extinguished, but reshaped, made eternal in its impossibility. Even as centuries passed, every breeze that stirred the laurel, every poet who sang beneath its shade, every victor who wore its leaves as a crown, carried forward the story of Daphne and Apollo. The sensuality of desire, the agony of pursuit, and the triumph of freedom were preserved together, inseparable. The mortal and the divine, the fire of passion and the coolness of resistance had fused into a myth that would endure beyond lifetimes. Daphne's body, rooted yet alive, remained a testament to the power of choice, of autonomy, of beauty unclaimed. Apollo's grief, radiant and eternal, remained a testament to the depth of longing and devotion that could exist without possession. In the end, the outcome of their story was neither simple nor comfortable. It was tragic, yes, but it was also exalted. Desire had chased freedom, freedom had escaped desire, and in that eternal tension, both were transformed. Daphne became something more than a nymph, more than flesh and fear. She became an idea, a living symbol of resistance and beauty. Apollo became something more than a god of light and prophecy. He became the keeper of longing, the immortal witness to desire that could never be consummated. Their sensual tension, their chase, their passions had not vanished. They had evolved into something eternal, something that would ripple across the world and through time forever, reminding mortals and gods alike of the exquisite agony of unfulfilled desire.
In the hush of the forest, long after the chase had ended, long after the golden light of the sun had faded into evening shadows, the story of Apollo and Daphne lingered as a living memory, a presence that refused to dissipate. It was not a memory confined to mortal recollection, nor to the temples or to the mouths of poets alone. It was woven into the very fabric of the world, carried in the whisper of leaves, the glimmer of sunlight on the laurel, the gentle murmur of streams that had witnessed her flight. Desire, unfulfilled yet unbroken, had left its imprint, and freedom, preserved at the cost of flesh, had left its echo. The myth spoke of longing, of passion that could neither yield nor vanish. Desire, when pressed too hard, can be both divine and cruel, a force that inflames hearts and tests limits. Apollo, the god of light, who had walked among mortals with song and prophecy, had been consumed by a fire so intense it threatened to blind him to all else. His pursuit had been relentless, filled with yearning that burned through reason, through pride, through every boundary he had known. Yet in his loss, a transformation occurred. That which had been passion now became devotion. The heat of desire shifted into the steady glow of reverence. In the absence of touch, in the impossibility of possession, his love became eternal, his worship unbroken, a testament to the power of longing itself.
Daphne, for her part, had paid the ultimate price for her freedom. Her flesh yielded to bark. Her limbs became roots that anchored her to the soil. Her hair spread into the cascade of leaves, and her breath became the slow, deliberate pulse of sap. Yet in that transformation, she remained herself, unyielding, untouchable, inviolate. Her spirit roamed the forest in every rustle of leaves, in every shaft of sunlight caught upon her branches, in every whisper of wind through her green canopy. She had fled desire, resisted capture, and in doing so had preserved the essence of her freedom, amplified into something eternal. Her body, immovable yet alive, became a living symbol of resistance, of autonomy, of the unyielding beauty that could never be possessed. The paradox of their story lingered in the air like a haunting melody. Love and desire, pursuit and flight, fire and water, they had collided and left no simple resolution, only the bitter-sweet residue of longing and reverence. Apollo's loss had birthed an eternal devotion, a love that could never fade because it could never be consummated. Daphne's escape, achieved not only through flight, but through metamorphosis, had preserved her freedom in a form far stronger than flesh, a permanence that defied mortal or divine claim. In their separation, each had found a new existence, one in reverent worship, the other in immortal autonomy. The audience, mortal or divine, could sense the emotional weight, the exquisite ache of impossibility, the beauty of what cannot be held yet endures.
Even the forest itself bore witness to this duality, reflecting the tension between desire and denial. The laurel's leaves shimmered in the sunlight, a soft, perpetual vibration that seemed to echo the rhythm of the chase. The streams whispered faintly, their water carrying reflections of Apollo's golden glow and the green canopy of Daphne's transformed body. Every breeze seemed to recall the rhythm of her flight. Every shadow marked the path of pursuit, and every bird that perched silently in the treetops appeared to pause in reverence for the impossible love that had unfolded beneath the branches. The natural world became a mirror of the emotional paradox, passion contained in stillness, desire preserved in absence, beauty immortalized in unattainability. There is a profound sensuality in the space left by unfulfilled desire. The air around the laurel holds the memory of breathless flight, the tension of Apollo's near touch, the tremble of Daphne's fear and strength. Desire that cannot be fulfilled leaves a resonance, a haunting vibration that lingers longer than satisfaction ever could. It is a desire not extinguished, but transformed, radiating into every leaf, every glimmer of sunlight, every song of the wind. The audience feels it, the ache, the yearning, the intimacy of what was almost grasped but forever denied. In this, the myth transcends mere narrative. It becomes an experience, an emotional echo that resides in the mind long after the story is told. Apollo's love, once impatient, consuming and blinding, became worshipful, patient, eternal. He could no longer seize the warmth of Daphne's body, yet he could honor her essence, her beauty, and her defiance through song, ritual, and memory. Every crown of laurel, every hymn sung in her honor, every offering laid at the roots of her transformed form became a gesture of devotion, a recognition of a love refined and deepened by impossibility. Desire had been denied in one form, yet it persisted in another, more enduring, more haunting. Daphne's freedom, once fragile, had become absolute. The human fear of possession, the mortal anxiety of desire pressing too close had been preserved, elevated, immortalized. Her metamorphosis was not a loss, but a triumph. What mortal form could not defend, the spirit had safeguarded through the permanence of the earth. In every leaf that rustled in the wind, in every branch that swayed with grace, her autonomy persisted. She had claimed the ultimate freedom, yet she remained intimately present in the world, her beauty a reminder of the cost and glory of resistance.
The haunting resonance of their story lies in its paradox: desire and freedom, pursuit and denial, longing and refusal. They coexist without resolution, each defining and amplifying the other. The heart of the audience is drawn into this tension, compelled to feel the ache of what cannot be fulfilled, and the sublime pleasure of what endures unbroken. The myth teaches that the most profound loves are often those that remain unattainable, that beauty is heightened when it escapes possession, and that the deepest devotion can arise from the recognition of impossibility. Apollo and Daphne, in their eternal separation, embody these truths. Even centuries later, the story lingers in every laurel, every temple, every whispered invocation of her name. The myth's sensual tension, the fever of the chase, the desperate strain of body and spirit has transformed into something far more lasting, a haunting meditation on longing, freedom, and the paradoxical beauty of love that cannot be consummated. It is a story of ache and reverence, of desire preserved in absence, of passion transmuted into worship. The audience leaves not with resolution, but with a lingering resonance, a haunting understanding of what it means to yearn, to resist, and to honor. In the final reflection, the myth teaches a subtle truth, that longing itself can be a form of immortality. Apollo's desire, forever unfulfilled, illuminates the world in golden devotion. Daphne's resistance, forever unyielding, lives in the rustle of leaves and the quiet majesty of the laurel. Their story is a living echo, haunting and unforgettable, reminding all who hear it that the greatest loves are often those that cannot be held, the truest beauty those that remain free, and the most enduring devotion that which persists despite impossibility. In every meditation upon this tale,
One feels the forest, the laurel, the golden sun, and the unrelenting pursuit. One feels the tremor of almost touch, the brush of desire against resistance, the transformation from flesh to symbol, from longing to reverential devotion. The story lingers in the mind and the heart, leaving an ache that is both sweet and sorrowful, a tension unresolved, a desire eternal. This is the power of myth, to capture the human and the divine, the sensual and the spiritual, the fleeting and the everlasting, and to leave its audience haunted by the beauty of what cannot be possessed, yet cannot be forgotten.